Let's begin by introducing myself. My name is Matthew Holewinski, and I'm a technical consultant here with Autodesk. And we would like to invite you to join us for an informative webinar in which you'll learn step by step how to take a simple cube and easily reshape it into an elegant sofa chair. Now, you will experience how fast and easy the reshape tools can be used to quickly sculpt your shapes. We'll show you seamless and automatic methods to control your geometry, both dynamically and numerically. You will learn simple and quick techniques for aligning and maintaining symmetry in your design, and we'll also show you intuitive steps on how to derive and build upon existing geometry that you already have in your scene. And then we'll finish up by showing you simple and quick steps to render your final scene with materials, lights, and global illumination. Now, this is a beginner level presentation, so I will be explaining step by step what I'm doing from a beginner's point of view. Now, before I get started, though, let's take a brief look at some other resources for finding out more about bonzai3d. What I'm going to do is jump to our website here at bonzai3d.com, and if you click on the webinars button here, it's on the right hand side here, I'll click on that. You can see that you can sign up for some of the other future presentations that are coming up. Okay, if you click on the webinar replays button, that'll take you to a page that you can watch some of the previously recorded presentations that we've already done. This is covering just one part of bonsai. If you look at some of these other ones like Land Sailor here, you can see that covers more of the NURB stuff, more of the organic modeling. Some of these cover more of the rendering aspects of bonzai3d. Here we have one for 2D drawings to 3D models, so on and so forth. Now here's some other excellent resources to get more information about bonzai3d. Go to the products pull-down menu, choose the bonzai3d option, and here's some options for bonzai3d. Click the features button here on the left, and this shows you a bunch of quick little videos. These are like 15 to 30 seconds long, and you can look at all the features and all the options that are in bonzai3d. And so just click on that, it'll show you the short little video. Now, all of the documentation is online, so you can simply access all the information of how the different tools work. Now, when you're in Bonsai, just right-click any tool, choose the manual option, it'll take you right to that page. You can also download a trial version here if you don't already have it. There's video tutorials. Now, there's like 4 or 5 hours of videos. Each one is 5 or 6 minutes long. It explains how each of the tools or features work. You can watch these just from our website, or if you're in Bonsai, you can actually right-click any tool and it'll take you right to that video and show you how that tool or feature works. Now, here's another neat way to quickly learn how bonzai3d works. Go to the self-paced tutorials, and from there you can download some bonsai files. You open the file and you follow along what it says, and you actually do it step by step, and you'll learn some of the basic introductory features of bonsai. You'll actually build the things that we see here. Okay, so those are just some external resources to help further you along with learning bonzai3d. So with that, let's get back to our presentation, which is going to be how do we take a cube and just use a few different tools here to reshape it into this elegant sofa chair that we see here. Well, first thing we're going to do is launch bonzai3d, and there it is. Now this is bonzai3d right out of the box, so I haven't altered or changed any preferences or anything. This is exactly what you see if you run the trial version or your full version for the first time. Okay, now if we want to create something, we have all the modeling tools here on the left, and I'll just pick one of the drawing tools. Let's select the 2D rectangle drawing tool. Now, whenever I click a tool on the left, the tool options or parameters for that tool are located on the right-hand side of the screen there. Okay, so there's the second point, and I just simply pull it up and make it a 3D object. Now, whenever you create something in bonzai3d, you get these control handles that automatically show up, and so you can see I can just take these controls and move those, so I can change the length, the width, and the height. Also notice not only can I move these controls dynamically here in the modeling window, but also notice in the tool options, as I move that control, you can see that the numeric information is automatically displayed over to the right hand side. Now if I want to type in some numbers, I can do that. Let's type 36 for the length. Let's type 30 inches for the width, and let's give it a height of maybe 30 inches also. Okay, and there's our box, 36, 30 by 30. Now, if you want to get rid of the controls, hit the escape key, and those controls are gone. Now notice that our default grid and our spacing is sort of large for the small little project that we're actually working at. So here's a real quick, easy way to quickly set your whole scene to a certain data scale or a certain size. Go to the File pull-down menu and choose the Project Settings options. And with that, we can change the color and things like that. But I'm just going to change one thing here. I'm going to go to the Working Units tab. And you can see I can set my data scale. I can make it large, small, medium, large, whatever I want. It can be a city, building. We're working with just a single chair, so maybe a small lamp would be the appropriate size. I change that one option, click OK, and it automatically readjusts everything for me. My geometry is still the same size. Everything you build in bonzai3d is at a 1-to-1 scale. But of course, we can see here that our grid and all of our default values are automatically set to that new scale. All right. Next thing that we want to do is maybe further adjust the size of that grid if we want. You don't have to do this, but in the lower left-hand corner here, you can see we can give a specific size for that. So let's type in 12 for the grid space sizing. And you can see now these dark lines are 1 foot apart. I can subdivide those darker lines by a certain number here. I'll type in 12. This is down the lower left-hand corner there. I type in 12. And now you can see I subdivided each foot line by 12, which gives me a 1-inch spacing. One other thing I like to do too is turn the grid snap on. So down the bottom there, see that little grid snap icon that's there. I can actually click on that and you can see that it automatically sets my grid snap to a specific spacing. What we're going to do now is take this cube that we have here and we're going to sculpt that into that sofa chair. What we're going to do is use primarily the reshaping tools that we have here. And so I actually pull the reshape suite of icons out, and we're going to use primarily these 4 tools, reshaping and offsetting lines. Let's use the offset segment. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is just click on any edge of any object. I drag and pull that, and you can see I can offset that edge. Now, I want it to be 6 inches. So my grid snap is turned on at the bottom, and so I drag that until it says 6 inches. I click, and that segment is now inserted into that box. I can use reshape, and what the reshape tool is going to do is let me pick any face of any object. I can click on that face. I can drag it, and if I pull it up, it's going to add volume to that object. If I push it in, it will subtract volume. So I just move that down just like that. And let's go -12. Now, notice up at the top middle of the screen, any tool that you're using, you see that highlighted field where it says the distance value. Every time I'm doing something, it automatically highlights that field for me. So I can type in a number at any time or just read the value so I know I'm going the exact distance that I want. Okay, that's if you want to be numerically accurate. Okay, so we reshape the top face down 12 inches. Let's do a couple more offsets here. Offset segment. So I click on that tool. I'm going to click on the right edge of the object there. You can see it highlights red. So I click and drag. Let's move that over 6 inches. Then I'm going to click on the left edge. I'm going to drag that to the right 6 inches. All right, then I'm going to select the reshape tool again. All right, and then with the reshape tool, I'm going to click the center face of the object, and I'm just going to sort of drag that down, and let's go -12 with that. Okay, with that, how's that for the chair? Pretty nice, huh? All right, maybe we need to do a little more work on that. What we'll do is maybe round the armrest that we have here, and what we can do is add additional volume to this box or to this chair that we're trying to create by using the drawing tools. Let me select the Circle 2 drawing tool. So you can see if I were to pick this tool right here, it allows me to click 2 points which define the diameter of the circle. And if I look in tool options, it's going to extrude it into a 3D shape. Now, as I move the cursor across different parts of the object, of course you can't see my cursor, but you can see when it is over a face of the object that the drawing grid automatically shows up on that face. Now, if I want to lock that, I can tap and release the F5 key. So I tap it right now, F5. And when I tap it, you can see it locks it at its current position. So now I can move the cursor anywhere, and I know my drawing grid is locked. Now, if I move the cursor to the left corner of the top of that chair, you can see it highlights that little green dot. I can snap right to the corner and click to start my circle. Now, these guides automatically show up, right? So I get these red, green, and blue guides, and I keep the cursor along that guide so I can make sure I snap it along the X direction or Y direction, whatever. Now, I move it until up at the top it says 8 inches. So I click, and that gives me an 8-inch diameter circle. Now, once the circle is done, it's trying to extrude that into a 3D shape. Move the cursor to the back of the chair. Now, see that green dot back there? My cursor is up in the top right corner of the chair. There's a green dot there. So if I click, you can see that the height has been automatically defined to be flush with the back of that chair. All right, let's create a second cylinder by snapping to the corner point on the left arm there. And it's dragging the cursor along the red guideline there until it says 8 inches. And then I'm going to extrude that by taking the cursor, positioning it at the back of the chair up on top there. I click, and now you can see that height matches in the back also. All right, now we have three different solid objects here, and if I tap and release the F5 key, it frees that plane to pretty much move anywhere that I want based on my cursor position. Now we have three different solid objects, and what we can do, since Bonzai is a true solids modeler, we can do things such as the Boolean tools, which can add or subtract these volumes together. So if I use the Boolean union, which is right here, okay, I click on two objects, and it'll union those pieces together. Let's click on the chair and click on that cylinder. And now those are all unioned to form one single solid object. You can see it resolves all the edge boundaries and everything. Okay, good clean solid object there. Next, what we want to do, our chair is starting to take shape here. I want to sort of take the back of the chair, give it more of a smooth, elegant look, maybe sort of curve the top part of this thing here. So what I'm going to do is draw a spline and insert a spline on the back face and just remove the top half above that spline. So how that's done is I can choose any of the drawing tools. Let's use the point spline drawing tool. And when I click on the point spline tool, you can see, look at the options over here. I'm going to make it a 2D object. So I click on this icon right here, which makes it a 2D object. I'm going to use the insert option. Now when I put the check next to the insert, what that means is if I draw on the face of an object, it'll insert it into that object. Now I'm going to make sure I snap right to the corner point here. So you can see if I zoom in here, I'm going to snap right to the corner point of where that curved surface meets the vertical edge on the back of that chair. To make sure the drawing grid stays in the back, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it in this case. I'm going to tap F5 just to make sure my grid stays at that current position. If I move the cursor over here in the corner, I click there, and I'm going to start to draw my spline across, but I want to make sure I find the center of that chair because I want the apex of that spline to arc right through the center of the chair. And how do I find that here? Well, just put the cursor up at the top, and you notice that it automatically highlights the endpoints and midpoints and things like that. So I put my cursor, I snap right to the middle, and then what I do is I tap the space bar. What that does, anytime I tap the space bar, it puts a temporary XYZ guideline there for me. So now I can just move my cursor along that red guideline, and I can make sure no matter where I move, as long as I'm on that red guide, I'm on the center of my chair. So I click my second point of the spline right there. Now as I move the spline over, you can see I'm going to snap to the corner point there. I get the green dot there, so I know I'm snapping right to the corner point, and then I double click to end that spline right at the end. And you can see because the insert option was on, it did not create that as a separate spline. It actually inserted it into the face of that object. All right, so tap the F5 key to make that grid go anywhere based on the cursor then, so we unlock that grid. Now, we can use the Reshape tool. So I click on the Reshape tool again. I'm going to click on the top face that's here and simply drag it through. And as I reshape that face all the way through, I can actually pull it to subtract that whole part of the object. Okay, so there's our chair starting to take shape here. All right, next thing we're going to do is create the cushions. And what I want to do is I want the cushions to match with the existing geometry that we already have there. So what I'll do is I'll use the Offset Outline tool. And what the Offset Outline tool is going to do for us is click on any face or whatever we have clicked on, it'll offset an object for us. Now, that has Insert turned on by default. Look in the tool options there. See the Insert option? I don't want to insert it into the face of the object, so I'm going to turn that off. And now I can click on that face, and I can just drag it, and you can see it creates that nice little offset shape. Let's go 1 inch. So you see up at the top, it says the distance is 1 inch right there. So I click, and there's a shape that matches that boundary exactly. Let's click on the bottom face for the bottom seat cushion. So I put my cursor right over the face down there. It highlights red. I click and drag, and if I want to type in a number, I can just do it. I just type in 0.5, enter, and now that offset is exactly 1/2 inch. Okay, now those are separate objects. Those are 2D shapes, and I want to reshape or extrude those into 3D cushions, right? So what I'll do is I choose the Reshape tool, and I move the cursor over the back face there, and notice that there's actually multiple faces there, right? There's faces on top of faces. We have our chair face, and then we also have our 2D shape, which are on the same coplanar plane. How do we pick the different object? Hit the Tab key, and you can see by hitting the Tab key, it'll parade through all the possible options. So I click on the object when it highlights, and I can reshape to extrude that into an object, solid object that is. So let's reshape that out 6 inches, and there we go. Let's take the bottom, do the same thing again. Just keep hitting the Tab key until it highlights the object that I want, and then I click and drag, and it's reshaping that up. And let's make that 6 inches. All right, now we have a slight problem though. This cushion up here is actually intersecting through the bottom cushion down there. All right, so what we need to do is make this cushion shorter so it's lying on top of this bottom seat cushion there. So what we'll do is just take the bottom face and reshape it upward. Now how am I going to get to that bottom face there? Well, if I click wireframe up in here, you can see there's different display modes. I can choose wireframe option. So here's the wireframe geometry that is there, and there's the bottom face of that cushion. So I got the Reshape tool active. I hit the tab key, and I can tab through until it highlights that bottom face, and then I can click and drag it, and I can reshape that face up. Now, how do I make sure it's flush with that cushion? What is the distance that I want? Well, I can try to mathematically figure it out, or just move the cursor right on the edge of that object, so it'll automatically reshape it to that edge. And there we go. Now that cushion is flush. I can go back to the shaded work mode up at the top there. When I click on that, you can see it goes back into shaded work mode. All right, so there's basically our geometry for the chair itself. We're going to round everything in just a bit here. But before we do that, let's go ahead and create the legs. Okay, right now it's laying on the floor. So what we'll do is we'll choose our pick tool. I'll do a Command A on Mac or a Control A on Windows, or you can just drag and window pick everything. And I'm going to move. And when I move objects, I can move either perpendicular or parallel to the current plane. And you can see I can tap and release the Command key. And on Mac or the Control key on Windows, it automatically toggles that at any time. Okay, so let's go perpendicular. So I'll move that up. I'm going to go 6 inches. How do I know it's 6 inches? I look up at the top there. The field is highlighting 6 inches. So I click, and now I know it's 6 inches above that ground plane. All right, so let's go ahead and deselect our objects. We select the pick tool, click a blank area, and let's work on our legs. So let's go to a bottom view here. So I spin my view around here, zoom into the bottom there, and let's choose a different color for the legs. I'm going to click on Material 2. So when I click on the Material 2 in the upper right-hand corner in the Materials palette, that makes that the active color. So anything I create now is going to be that color. Let's go back to our drawing tools, and I select the 2D rectangle tool. What am I going to do with the rectangle? Well, I'm going to extrude it. So on the right-hand side in the tool options, I'm going to click the extrude icon, and I'm going to turn the insert off because I don't want to insert it into the chair. I want the leg to be a separate object. So make sure insert's off there. All right, so we zoom to the bottom here. I make sure my grid's on the bottom there. I move the cursor to the corner, snap right to the corner there, and drag it. And of course, if I keep it on that magenta guide that automatically shows up, I can make sure I create a perfect square. So let's go ahead and click when it's 5 inches and drag that down 6 inches. And there's our leg. All right, now I want to work just on the legs for now. And I want to isolate just that leg. And I can turn objects on different layers on and off, whatever I want. Or here's a quick little tip for being able to quickly isolate just the object that you're currently working on. I pick the object. See, it highlights red. And then in the Edit pull-down menu, you can see that there's an Isolate Objects option. Now, there's a key shortcut for that, of course, so you don't have to go to the pull-down menu. And when you choose that, all it does is it isolates everything except for what you currently have picked. All right, let's work on this leg a little bit here. All we have is a simple box, and we want to taper this. One way that we can modify or sculpt objects in Bonsai is to move topological parts of the object. So I move my cursor and select the Move tool, which is right there. And now with that tool active, it's going to try to move the whole object. So how do I get to parts of the object? Well, I can hold down the Command key on Mac or the Control key on Windows, and that lets me move just a face, just a segment, or just a point of the object. So I move down here, it highlights just the segment, so I click and drag, and you can see it moves that segment. All right, I'm going in the perpendicular direction, so I tap and release Command, and so now I can go along the parallel direction of the current plane. Now notice these guides are always showing up for me, which are an extremely helpful thing. So I can just move it along the red guide to make sure I'm moving it along the x-axis, go about 3 inches in, and we can make sure everything's nice and planar. All right, let's do the same thing on the other side of the leg here. I'm going to spin around, hold the Command key down, grab that bottom edge right there, and just sort of move it along the green guide. So I can move that in 3 inches. I know it's 3 inches because I look up on top there. It says 3, so I click, and there's our tapered leg. All right, I want to put some embossed type detail around these two faces here. So to do that, I'm going to first use the Offset Segment tool. I click on Offset Segment. I'm going to click on the top edge of the segment and drag that down. And then I click on this edge and drag that down. Now the insert's on, so those are inserted in there. So now if I use the Offset Outline, I have Insert Off for this tool, so you can see it's going to generate a separate outline. Now I'm going to change my grid snap here. Right now it's set to 1 inch. So down the bottom I type in 0.5 for that. So now my cursor will snap to a 1/2 inch interval spacing. So with the Offset Outline tool active, I click on that face and I drag it one single click and it goes 1/2 inch. Do the same thing on this face. I click drag, and I get a 1/2 inch outline on that face. The reason I didn't insert it yet is because I want to modify that shape. So there's a set of line editing tools here, so we can break, close, trim, and join lines and draw anything that we want, and work with lines just as easily as our 3D objects. Let's use the fillet tool, which is used for lines in our line tools here. So I click on the fillet, give it the radius we want. I'm going to type in 0.5 in tool options on the right hand side there, and then I'm going to click on my shape, and you see it'll add a nice fillet for all the corner points of that shape. All right, now that we're done modifying our 2D shape, I'm going to go to one other reshape tool that we haven't looked at yet, and that's the imprint tool. Imprint, what it does is it imprints a 2D shape into the face of an object. So I click the 2D shape, I click the object, and that shape is imprinted into it. Let's click this shape, click on the object, and it's imprinted in. That's how the imprint tool works. The reason I did that was because now if I use the reshape tool, I can reshape this interface and reshape it in. I can drag it in 1/2 inch or 1 inch or however far I want to recess it in. So let's grab this face and reshape that in a little bit. Maybe go about 1/2 inch with that one too. Okay, and there's pretty much a detail for that leg. Now let's put a little molding up on top here. So let's sweep some kind of a shape along the top of our leg here. Now, of course, I'm not going to draw anything fancy here. I'm going to keep it simple to keep things moving here. But of course, you can draw any type of shape that you want. I'm going to select the drawing tool, which is, I'm going to use the circle 1 tool. I'm going to draw it as a 2D shape. So I click the 2D icon there in the tool options palette, and I just click and drag, and let's give it a 1/2 inch radius. And then we go to our sweep tool, which is right here. All right, let's go ahead and highlight that for you. Axial sweep. And what we do is, first thing we pick is a source, the second thing we pick is the path. So here, the source is going to be a circle, and the second thing is whatever highlights red. So if I click on the top face, that's my path, and that source just follows wherever the boundary of that face goes. I can make it faceted, or if I click this option, smooth, then you can see really it's just a single mathematical smooth surface that's generated for that object. All right, what we need to do now is take that swept object, and I'm going to move it down about 1/2 inch so it's flush with the top of the leg. All right, so that's basically the shape of the leg. And what we want to do now is create the other leg. So of course we use the same one and just mirror copy it over to the other side. So how do we reveal the other geometry that we isolated earlier? We'll go to the edit pull down and we'll choose reveal objects. Of course, is a key shortcut for that also. Reveal brings back everything that we isolated. All right, now how do we make sure this leg is going to mirror and copy over to the other side right along the center of that chair? Well, it's pretty easy. I click on the pick tool. I'll window pick my objects here. I'm going to choose the mirror tool. And when I choose one of these transformation tools, look in the tool options, you can see I can choose the copy option. So I click on that. Now, how do I find the center of that chair? Now, one way of doing that is there's guides. So there's a guide tool. So actually what I can do is before I do the mirror operation, I can just use a guide. I can click, I can snap to the center, drag it along the green guide, and I have this infinite guide that I can move and use to actually snap to and help me out there. Now I'm going to undo that because you don't always have to even use the guides. Just use the automatic snapping that is automatically built into Bonsai. So what I can do is just do a mirror, copy, I snap to the center there. Notice that it automatically gives me that center position there. I snap to it, and I get this green guide. I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but there's a green guide that automatically shows up for me. I just move the cursor along the green guide and click to make sure I maintain symmetry of that leg as it mirrors to the other side. All right, let's go ahead and try that again. I'm going to window pick these objects, hold on the shift key to window pick multiple objects there. So I have all these objects picked here, and we'll do the mirror operation again. We got a copy option on up there on the right, snap to the midpoint right here, and now I can just leave my cursor along that red guideline. I click those 2 points to find the mirror line, and everything mirrors across the center of that object. So all of our legs are lined up perfectly. All right, let's do one more thing. Let's put a little molding on the bottom here. Like I said, I'm not going to draw anything fancy here. I'm going to keep things moving. So what I'm going to do is do maybe a 2D shape, maybe a simple circle here, about a 1/2 inch circle. And then we use our sweep tool that we used earlier. So just go ahead and click on sweep. And I'm going to click on the circle, click on the bottom of the chair. That's the path, and that shape follows wherever the path goes. Okay, we're just about done with our chair. What we're going to do is round some of these edges that are there. So we need to move to the rounding tool, which is in the reshape suite of icons. And so we click on the round tool. We give it the radius that we want. Let's give it a 1-inch radius. And then if I were to click on the cushion, it rounds that. Click on that cushion, it rounds all of those edges. And then if I click on the chair, it rounds all the edges of that chair also. All right, now, if you want to round just a single edge at a time, you can hold down the command key on Mac or the control key on Windows, and you can round just a single face or just a segment. And I'll actually show that in just a second here. But anyways, here we're getting pretty close to the type of chair that we actually want, right? Now, there's one thing missing. There's the wood type panel that is sort of embossed in the front of the chair here. So let's see how we can easily create that using the reshaping tools. Well, what we'll do is use the offset outline tool. We know how that works now, but I'm going to turn the insert option on because actually I want to offset this face right here, and I want to insert it into my sofa object. So I'm going to click on that face, drag it, and I'm going to go 1 inch. Okay, and that is inserted into the object. And the reason I did that is because I can now use reshape. So clicking on the reshape tool, I'm going to click on that face right there, and I'm going to reshape that in, and I'm going to go in -1 inch. Okay. Now, if, like I said, at any time, if you want to be exact, you can always type in numeric information. But I'm just going to sort of eyeball it until it says 1 inch up on top. Okay, so there's our recessed area that's sort of carved in to our chair. Now, we need a separate object there to create the wood grain panel. But before we do that, we don't want that hard edge there around the inside. We want to round that also. Now, we've already rounded the whole chair. You say, well, now how do I get just to that one part? Well, click on the round tool. We have the rounding set to 1 inch. I move my cursor right on that edge, and it's going to try to round the whole object, and that's not what I want. So I just leave the cursor there, and I keep hitting the tab key. The tab key will keep parading through all the possible options. So there's an edge, there's a face, and there's the outline there. That's exactly what I want. It's on the outline right now, so I click, and now the rounding, or whatever the tool is applied just to that highlighted part. Okay, so there's a nice rounded profile there. But like I said, we got to fill that area in with a separate object. So I don't want to use reshape to reshape this face back out because we're going to reshape the sofa part. I want to create a separate object that matches that exact profile that we have there. So what I'm going to do is use the derivative tools. And that's this suite of icons right here. And there's this tool that I'm going to use, extrude. And what that's going to let me do is click on a 2D shape or the face of a object, such as this face right here. And you can see I can click and drag, and you can see it's going to create a brand new object for me. So I pull it out, and let's do that 1 inch. Pull it out 1 inch, and click, and there it is. Now it's a separate piece. All right. Now let's make that a different color. So I can drag and drop material 2 on there to give it a different color. All right. Now one last thing we need to do is round that edge. So we'll go back to the rounding tool. We'll set that to 1/2 inch round. And once again, I'm going to hold the command key down on Mac or the control key on Windows so I can click just the top face of that object that we have there and round just that top face only. And there it is. That's pretty much the basic geometry using primarily just the reshaping tools here. Okay. Now at this point, what I would like to do is just take a couple minutes further and show you how to create a realistic rendering out of this. So we go back to our file here. You know, how do we get the mirror type reflections on the surface and the nice ambient occlusion, the shadows that are in there? You know, how can we quickly do that? And I'm going to show you that because in some of the other presentations that we have, we sort of quickly say, yeah, you put a couple of lights in there and some materials and you render it, it'll look like that. Well, you know, this is a step-by-step. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it here. So let's go ahead and do that. First thing we're going to do is modify the materials that are assigned to the object. So if I double click on material 1, it gives me all the parameters for that. So I can go in and change the reflection and transparency. I can load an image map, whatever I want. Or notice down here, there's a bunch of materials that come with Bonzai. So if you don't have it open, click on the little widget there, and you can see we have all these different categories of these predefined materials that are already set up. So let's go to the furniture category, and I'm going to use this brown leather that we have there. So if I double click on it, I double click, and that predefined, all those parameters are automatically set to my material that I have up there. Okay, let's click on material number 2, which is the color assigned to all of the objects that are wood. So let's go to our pull down menu. Let's go to the wood working type category. And here's a nice walnut wood there. I double click on it, and now all those preset parameters are now assigned to my material that I have up here. Okay, now we also want to create some kind of a ground plane. We want some shadows to show up on the ground. So I'll just take this and click on material 3. up at the top there, I'll click on the top view, and then I'll use the rectangle drawing tool to create a 2D flat rectangle ground plane there. So let's go back in the top there and click on our 3D view icon, and there's our scene. It's all done, right? So now, what if we want to change the size of those textures? Well, bonzai3d automatically texture maps your objects for you. If you want to modify that, you can click on the Edit Texture tool, which is right here. You click on any face of the object, and you get these controls that can be used to modify that. So as I move these arrows, I can change the horizontal, vertical, or the ratio, or rotate it, and move that texture anywhere that I want on that object. And now, just like the other tools, if you look at the tool options, all the numeric information is there. Let's click on the wood grain pattern. Once again, we can modify the scale of that. We can rotate that texture, so maybe the wood grain is going horizontal instead of vertical or whatever, and move that wood grain. Maybe we want the knot to show up in the corner or something. I mean, we have a lot of control graphically to modify that texture in the modeling window. Now here's another tool to help globally modify multiple objects. Like I said, Bonzai automatically maps the objects for you, but if you want to quickly override the default parameters that it gives, there's a map texture tool, which is right next to the Edit Texture tool. You click on that, you can set pretty much any parameters that you want, and now you can use that tool to assign those parameters to whatever you actually click on. So there you can quickly assign some parameters to multiple objects. With that, let's click on the Render Zone button up in the right-hand corner, and it'll do a render zone rendering of our scene. Now that's not too bad for just applying a couple of materials. We didn't do anything with the lighting yet. So what we're going to do is just click a couple things and turn them on for the final rendering to help spice this up a little bit. So let's go back to our shaded work mode. So up in the top, I click on the shaded work icon. And the first thing we're going to do is adjust the actual lighting. So if you look over here, you look at our palettes on the right-hand side, there's a lights palette. I click the little arrow to open that up. And here's our sunlight. If I double click on that, you can see that it is a directional light. We can actually choose the sun position through an actual database if we want. But here's a neat little trick that I like to do to quickly globally illuminate a scene. There's only like a few things we have to change here. One is I'm going to turn the shadow option off. So there's no shadows that are going to be created from that actual light source. In the parameters tab, I click on that. I'm going to click the apply atmospheric light. What that does, it adds additional light. It's like a dome that has light coming from multiple directions. So instead of a single sunlight source, you also are adding light coming in from multiple directions. And that's it. I also want to adjust some of the materials that we have assigned here. If I were to double click on this material 2, which is the wood material that we have, you can see we have color, reflection, and transparency. I can click on the render zone material type. What that does, it gives me more parameters and more options. And one of the things I'm going to change is for the reflection of that material, I'm going to choose mirror. And so I get a mirror type reflection on that. Of course, I can increase or decrease the amount of reflectivity on that surface. I can increase the diffuse lighting and ambient lighting that's coming off that surface also. Okay. Now here's a neat trick, so that the ground plane, I want to cast sort of like some ambient occlusion on that ground plane, but I don't want to see the ground plane. So how can we do that? I'll double click on material 3, which is our floor. And what I'm going to do is choose the render zone material type. And for the color of that object, instead of this green color we got there, we're going to choose background. And what that does is it renders that object, so it's an invisible object. It's going to render whatever the background is. And the reflection parameters are going to be set to catcher. All it does is catches shadows and reflections only. So it's an object we won't see, but we will see shadows on there. All right, that's it for the materials. We're ready to do our final rendering, but I want to change a couple of render zone parameters. So I hold down the Option key on Mac or the Alt key on Windows, and when I choose render zone, it brings up all the rendering options. All right, let's modify a couple of things. First thing I'm going to do is click on the Global Illumination tab. I'm going to turn Use Ambient Occlusion. What that's going to do is subtract light where two surfaces come close to each other. That gives it more of a realistic effect. And all we have to do is give our scene size. What is it? Large, small, a city, a building? We just sort of, this is a large object, I guess, so click on that. And that automatically sets all my parameters for me. Now, I can still go in and override those if I want. For example, The distance parameter is how close does something else have to be to some other object to start occluding light or subtracting light from it. So I'm going to turn that up a little higher, and you see the distance is 12 inches. This is sort of an arbitrary value, but you can see any face of any object in the scene, if it's within 12 inches from it, it'll start to subtract light from that area. Less light will get into those areas. And we can even boost up the additional contrast to make those darker areas even darker. And we'll also turn on the final gather. The final gather bounces light, so we have light coming from multiple directions from our light, but the final gather option gives it an additional bounce to sort of quickly radiate light through the scene. All right, for the actual scene tab here, what I'm going to do is change the background color. Let's just make that a plain color. I'm going to choose white. You can load an image map or whatever. And the last thing I'm going to do is we have a reflection assigned to the wood, but what in our scene is going to reflect on that wood? There's nothing else in our scene. There's no other objects. And so we can artificially introduce a environment map, which will reflect on any reflective surfaces. So we turn that environment option on, load any type of an image, and I'm just going to find something here randomly. Here's some preview images. Some different renderings here. Scroll down here so we can find something. Let's try that one. Open. And that image will then be reflected on any material that has a reflective property to it. Now we can control how that image is mapped around the scene. You can set that if you want, or just leave everything at the actual defaults. With that, that's everything you need to know to quickly do a quick little global illumination rendering of your scene. And you can see as this renders one last time, we have shadows turned off, right? The light's not casting shadows, but we're getting what looks like shadows, and that's coming from the ambient occlusion option. It is subtracting light where these two surfaces meet. So notice that we're getting some darkness in the corners here between the cushions. We're getting some darkness on the floor because the bottom of the chair is within a foot of the actual floor plane itself, and that's how we get that realistic ambient occlusion look. And the global lighting is coming from the light source, which has light coming from multiple directions, plus the final gather option, which is going to bounce that light one time. With that, that's everything I wanted to show today to get to this point that we have here. I would like to thank you for your time today. And I should mention once again that this is just a few of the many features that are in Bonzai. Be sure to check out some of the other presentations that we have covering a lot of the other areas that we didn't have time to show today. We are now done, so you can log out whenever you want. And I'm going to stick around for another 10, 15 minutes or however long it takes to answer any questions that you have. So start typing, send those in. I'll read those out loud, and I'll try to answer those for you. So with that, I would like to thank you and have a nice day.